Hello, and welcome back to the Rockwood Academy. I'm your host, David Flanagan, also known across the internet as Rockwood. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we are continuing our exploration of cloud native and advanced event driven architectures using any new forward future facing software that we can get our hands on. And today is no exception. Now, today we're going to take a look at adding a new feature to Guidepad, and that is a project that we have covered once or twice on the channel before. The secret about today's episode is that we are joined by both members of the founding team. Hello, Matthew and Reggie. How's it going?
Hello, good. Thanks for having
Good.
me.
Good. Thanks for having us. Really happy to be here.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I think I've made my feelings about Guidepad very clear to people over many sessions now, but let's get back to that in a minute. First things first, can you both just say hello, tell us a little bit about you and what you're up to?
Yeah, Reg, I'll defer to you. You go first, and I'll
Sure.
pick it up in a second.
Yeah. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Guidepad, and my background is in consulting. Did a lot of work at cloud about 10 years ago. Really got interested in distributed systems. Built a platform. Sold some software to the government, and met Matt about 4 or 5 years ago. We got started building software, and we built Guidepad as our own internal developer team tool, and it's kind of taken us over the last few years, and we're really excited about what we built and where we're going. We are a unified developer platform, so we could cut across a few of the main pieces of building, software such as DevOps, AI, ML ops, data integration, and workflow automation. And I'll let Matt introduce himself, and we'll go from there.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. So I'm Matt, CTO, co-founder. Yeah, like Reggie said, we met 4 or 5 years ago. My background is a little different. I was in academia for about 7 years, did biotech for a bit, bounced around in there, fell out into normal tech, and then met Reggie, and the rest is sort of history. So yeah, Guidepad is sort of our attempt to crystallize all of our experiences over our years, our combined years, like building these distributed systems. When building these sorts of systems, it's hard to standardize things. It's hard to make things repeatable. It's hard to make things observable. And so Guidepad sort of takes all of our learnings about how to do those things well, bundles it up into a platform, and then tries to make it available to other folks.
Awesome. All right. You said something that I hadn't heard before, but made a lot of sense when you said it, unified developer platform. So maybe the both of you can dive into that a little bit and just help the audience understand, what can Guidepad deliver and what problem is it solving?
Sure. Yeah. So, when you think about building distributed systems today, you're probably talking about, half a dozen tools off the bat, something for your CI/CD, something for your backend, something for your logging, your issue tracking, data engineering, right? Managing your infrastructure. So Guidepad has the building blocks to put all of those things into one tool. And then whether you want to do stuff in a user interface or at the command line or in an interactive coding session, Guidepad has ways into all of those things so that you can do what you need to do without having to jump between a bunch of different tools, essentially. But it's also not that opinionated that you couldn't sort of integrate Guidepad with stuff that you're already using. So, if you have a preferred workflow management system, but you want to use Guidepad for generating endpoints or managing your units of work that go into that pipeline system, you can do that. If you don't have a workflow management system, but you do have maybe a CI/CD thing, you can use Guidepad's work plan system to automate, the tasks that you're doing, and sort of as you get more comfortable with the system, you can put its tentacles out into more of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Nice. Anything to add there, Reggie?
No, I think he hit the nail on the head. A lot of our customers right now have come to us. Some of the use cases that we've seen, a lot of our clients, larger enterprises, are looking for a unified cloud control plane. Most customers we talk to are hybrid in nature, so they have workloads across AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and some still have workloads on premise. And so having one tool that can help manage all of that, manage and control everything. And then data engineering and workflow automation has been another big thing for us. So, as you'll see once Matt goes into the demo and we start diving into the tool. Very little code that has to be written. We do things dynamically at runtime. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have covered this before, and the very little code to be written really highlights one of the key strengths of Guidepad, and something that you promote on the website as well is that you can build a platform or software as data. Now, for anyone that hasn't seen anything previously, maybe we can go into that in a little bit of detail, just for a few minutes before we go into the actual live portion of this. But what does that mean? How do people build their new pieces of software and their platforms using Guidepad as that substrate?
Sure. Yeah. So it really, when we think about like a platform as data, right? We're talking about moving, building a system from sort of a like not a build the system sort of thing where you go in and you write code for each of the pieces. This is sort of like the old sort of infrastructure as code thing, right? Where you have a bunch of files, they're spread out. Maybe you're good at organizing them and they're in one repository. More likely, they're not in one repository; they're in many repositories. They all have distinct, like ownership, and maybe the folks that own those things don't get along all the time. So there's a lot of friction, right, when you're stuck sort of in file land. And so what we try to do with Guidepad is move you out of file land into data land, where you can be more collaborative. It means that you're, rather than writing scripts that orchestrate your software and your applications, you are writing specs, so configuration. And then Guidepad takes those specs and produces things for you, right? Whether it's the commands that need to go out and deploy a web server in your Kubernetes cluster, or Guidepad needs to manage an ingress for you, or Guidepad needs to create an S3 bucket for you. Those things become configuration problems rather than sort of code problems. And when you're in data, you can sort of move the paradigm to, I'm not building a system, I'm programming a system. So things become more repeatable, things become more observable. You can write, then the scripts that you're writing are actually like orchestrating all of the components of your system that are stored within some data storage engine. And we'll talk about this more when we go into the platform, but Guidepad is sort of data storage agnostic. It has what we call the type system, which is a layer on top of what you would consider to be like an ORM. But that ORM, allows us to plug into, different data storage things, whether that's a database, Postgres, MongoDB. You can do things. You can actually store parts of your system in files if you want to. You can have a data store that's an S3 bucket. You can have a data store that's an API. So there's a lot of flexibility as far as like where you store the parts of your system. And what that allows you to do is to tailor that storage to the performance requirements of each sort of piece of your system. So it's like, well, this particular data structure works the best in Postgres, so let's put it there. Well, this part, we actually don't really care about the structured stuff so much. We want to be able to store a bunch of disparate, polymorphic types of things. Let's put that in MongoDB because it doesn't care so much about the schema. There's less overhead about maintaining stuff. Yeah, I'm rambling now, so I'm going to stop doing that. And if you have a question, have it answer it.
No, it's not rambling. You're just sharing how the system works, and I think a lot of that's will be solidified for people as they see is explore the platform, add new features to it, and kind of show how to work with it. So, maybe this would be a good time then for you to discuss or share what is our plan for today. What are we going to do?
Yeah, sure. Should I share my screen now? I can do that. And
go for it.
Talk through. Great. Let me actually move the call window over so that I'm not sharing all of us. Here we go. Great. Okay, perfect. So can you see it?
Yep.
Awesome. So I guess maybe before we get into what we're going to do today, I can spend just a few moments talking about like the high level concepts within the system. That might help folks as we sort of move through into the actual like implementation. So this is the Guidepad UI. This is the instance that I created just for this, this live stream. So every Guidepad installation we call an instance. Typically, it's one per customer. They all get their own domain name. We can host them, or they can be hosted on premise. We have an installer that sort of stands one of these up in like a couple minutes. With this installation, you get what we call an environment. An environment is a bundle of resources. So draw a logical box around like an AWS account or a Kubernetes cluster or an Azure account, and that's an environment, right? Environments can be big or small, just depends on where you want to draw the boundaries around them. You can see in this particular instance, we only have two right now. We have a Kubernetes cluster here, which is what is sort of hosting all the infrastructure for this. And then we have a build environment, and that uses the Packer from Terraform. We'll actually use that as part of the demo. So environments are bundles of resources. Into those environments, we put services, right? And so services are the things that provide capabilities for they're actual like parts of your system, right? And so in this particular instance, we have the things that come along with every Guidepad installation. So we have the user interface, which is what we're looking at now. We have two things to manage work plans, so the automation piece here. We have an OpenSearch data store, which is used to store the logs and the events that go on in Guidepad. And I think, no, not issues. Issues are stored in the main system. Anyway, I'll get to that in a second. And then we have this thing, which basically just manages ECR credentials so that this cluster can access all the images that it needs. And then this one here is the generative API, and not generative in the Gen AI sense, but generative in the I read a bunch of operation specifications and make endpoints. And it does that in all the frameworks that we support. And that right now that is REST, GraphQL, and I think we do it over Message Exchange. Yeah, we have it's not deployed in this instance, but we could deploy a RabbitMQ server, and then that server would accept API requests and give the results and all that good stuff. So I talked about operations, and we'll also use operations in our in the feature we're building today. So operations are portable, repeatable units of work that have predefined inputs and outputs and a handler. So you can think of them sort of as like portable functions. And those, these operations, they're data records, and then you can sort of summon them up at will and use them. But the Guidepad API uses those definitions to create the endpoints that I just mentioned. And the nice thing about operations is that they can execute in any environment that you've already set up for your instance. So for this particular demonstration, the operations that I run can either run locally on the machine that I'm looking at here, or they can run in that Kubernetes cluster that was in the environments list. And I'll show you an example of that, like as we get into things. Okay, so we have environments, we have services. How do you manage the services in the environments? Well, we do that through what we call state plans, right? And so I'll go into a state plan and sort of show you how that works. So state plans are the actual commands that are used to get the service in that particular state in a given environment. And we'll take a look at this deployed plan for Kubernetes. This is sort of the default one. Every service, when you create a service definition, if it doesn't have state plans defined within that definition, it just uses the default ones, and this is one of them. You can see it's just one little node. All of the state plans are DAGs, right? Just directed acyclic graphs. They're made out of phases, so every node is a phase. That's this box here. And then inside a phase, you have serially ordered stages, right? So this one only has one stage, but I could add more below it, and those would execute top to bottom when this phase executes. So if I click into the stage, you can see there's actual commands in here, and I apologize, I have to like move stuff around. I'm on my tiny laptop screen. But yeah, so these are the actual commands. You can see it runs a series of Ansible steps when it executes to create a volume claim, a service definition, and then a deployment. They're parameterized. You can see in here that we're doing templating, right? So this can pull information from what we call the context of the state plan's execution. And that context includes things like the service that you're deploying, the environment it's being deployed into, any requirements for the service. And I'll talk about requirements more later. They're a very flexible way of specifying either what a particular thing needs to execute, or individual pieces of data that a part of the system needs, like at runtime, to do the thing. So you use state plans to put services into particular states. If I go to the environment over here, you can see that I've been deploying things. And I think I mentioned this, I might not have, but the UI is a couple steps behind the core capabilities of the system, and we're on a develop branch. So any visual bugs, you'll just have to forgive me for. We are aware of them, but I wanted to give you the latest and greatest, so that's why this is showing not a number. Anyway, yeah, so you can see that these were all deployed earlier, and so they went from transitioning to deployed, transitioning to deployed. I deployed them a couple times. And then these are all the services that are in the system. Like, it shows you the ones that like you've deployed into this environment, and then these are all of the ones that haven't interacted with this environment yet, but they could. Yeah, okay. So environments, services, state plans, and state machines. I haven't talked about state machines yet. This view is broken, so I'm not going to click into it. But what state machines do is they orchestrate state transitions, right? So it is like the literal, computer science definition of a state machine, right? It's got states and transitions. But what Guidepad can do is it can use your state machine. I'll actually show you this like in code form because I have it there when we hop out of this view and into a different one. But the state machines can be set into autonomous mode. That's this little toggle here. And when I do that, there's a service called the orchestrator that manages the state transitions for the state machine and then uses the state plans autonomously to move this service that's attached to the state machine from state to state when the requirement conditions are met. And David, that's the thing that we did for the S3 bucket that we were managing autonomously. So like enforcing that the permissions were set properly. If someone deleted it, it recreated it. Yeah, so that was using the state machine concept and that orchestrator that I mentioned.
So just for anyone who hasn't seen the previous videos, we've done a couple of cool things with Guidepad to date to show the kind of benefits and power behind the platform. One of them was we built an S3 reconciler that made sure that an S3 state, like IAC, was always reconciled to the correct state. Even if it was deleted, it was recreated and stuff. That was very cool. People should go check out that video, and I'll put a link to it after the live stream. And the other thing that we have built before was the URL shortener with some generative AI summarizing of the HTML components as well.
Yep.
You can do a lot with Guidepad, and you've kind of touched on a lot of the primitives that are exposed to people.
Right.
And then it's the way that you connect these together with Guidepad that kind of makes them kick in and do the thing that you need to do. So yeah.
Right. That's sort of the magic is there's been a term that's sort of come into vogue recently, which is like compositional systems and compositional software. I think Guidepad is sort of, just by its very nature, like a system like that, right? Because you have these primitive entities, you can extend them, you can customize them, and then you can put them together to make basically anything that you want to make. And I think maybe that's a good segue into talking about the architecture of the thing that I want to build on the stream, unless you have another question or anything before I do that.
No, take it away.
Great, perfect. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to try to build an AWS Lambda replacement for Node. So the ability to run Node code serverlessly through the Guidepad framework. And so if we think about what Lambda is doing, right? So you've got AWS up here, and then you've got your Lambda function. So this Lambda function, and that's a colon that should not be in there. So get your Lambda function that like executes. I don't know. There's some black box, right? There's some containerized black box over here that they run your function in, because you can attach a particular like image to it. So you need a Docker image that contains the your code artifacts and all the requirements. That's if you want to use any packages that aren't contained within Lambda's default runtime. So then and then out here you maybe have a I don't know. I think they released a thing back in 2022, which is like Lambda URLs. Right, so you can have like a Lambda URL in front of it, and then you've got your little client over here. Let's find a nice icon for a client. You know what? I hate that Miro changed this. Let me just find client. No, you're not going to help me out. All right, fine, whatever. I'll just use this again. Okay, so you have your client here, right? And it's going to send the requests to the Lambda URL. I don't know why I made that so big. Let's make that smaller. Thank you. So it's going to send that over there. And then the Lambda URL is, attached to your thing. And this is going to use your Docker image to, start the thing in the black box. And then when the black box is done, it's like, oh, hey, here's a result. So it's going to go back to the client. So we're going to try to build something like this in Guidepad. And what does that look like as far as like Guidepad components? So what we're going to do is we will have our environment. And I'm going to draw that with a dotted line, right? So this is our Guidepad environment. We'll just call it the raw code K-base environment. So we got this thing here. And then inside there, what we need to do is we have to have two things, right? We have to have something to represent the code that we want to execute. And we need to have a place to execute it. So the place that we're going to execute it is what we call a language executor. Let me just draw one of those. And full disclosure, I kind of already have this for Python, but we have a full stack engineer on the team who isn't super well versed in Python and would rather write stuff in JavaScript. And so I'm trying to be nice to him and give him a way to write the operations in the way that he would want to write them. Yeah, okay, so got that. This is solid. And so this is going to be our Node, I don't know how that happened, Node.js language executor.
Nobody can type when they're being watched. It's just like an unwritten
I swear, like my TPM, my words per minute go down to like 60, right? when I'm being observed. It's Schrodinger's words per minute, right? Like they're incredibly fast as long as no one is looking at me. Okay, so we have the language executor, and then the other part we need to have is the operation, right? So we need a Node.js operation. And this Node.js operation is going to contain a couple things. So actually, let me delete this internal label, and I'll make it a little bigger so that I can put some stuff inside it. And the stuff I'm putting inside it are they're like represented by database references, so they're not literally contained within this object. And I should say that these are objects, right? Like in a database somewhere, right? Like we're going to have a language executor record that exists somewhere, and then we're going to have an operation that also exists. So we're going to have the we're going to have the Node.js operation, right? And within that operation, we're going to have a couple things. We're going to have the input type. We're going to have the output type. And we're going to have the implementation, basically, right? So let me make this a little bigger. Make this a little bigger. Because I have to draw some other things. Okay. And Miro recently changed the thing where if you drag to highlight, it also highlights the thing in the background. So I can't just like select. It's so annoying. Anyway, so we've got this stuff here. The implementation is interesting because in order to store it, right? So if you think about the implementation, right, that's just a handler. It's the code. But in order for it to be portable, it needs to be stored somewhere. So what we do in Guidepad is we have this notion of an artifact, which is stored in what we, I hate saying we call it because it's such like a simple word of like, of course you would call it this, but we have what we labeled the storage backend. And a storage backend is just an abstraction layer on top of different like storage things for file-like stuff. So for data-like stuff, things that are either structured or semi-structured, we have types and data stores. For things that are unstructured, just like file blobs, right? Those are artifacts, and those go in storage backends. So for the implementation, what we're going to do is we're going to store that in an artifact, right? So we're going to have an implementation artifact. And this is going to contain the code of our little Node.js execution. Full disclosure, it'll probably be like console.log something, just to make things not that complicated. But we can get more complicated later, just to proof of concept, right? You're going to walk first, or crawl first, and then walk. So you got that. The other thing that might be obvious to folks, like an obvious question, right, is like you have this operation, you have the executor, like this thing is supposed to run the function. Like how does it do that, right? Like how do you get from here to here? Well, the way we do that in Guidepad is we have this idea of a service exposure. So a service exposure typically sits on the boundary of a environment, right? Sorry. I can close this, right? Yes, thank you. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, you can just click hide on that EV Mux thing.
Oh, this too. Perfect. Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure if that showed up to the viewers or not, but I'm glad that I hit it. So anyway, so typically a surface exposure sits here, like on this boundary, right? And it allows traffic into a particular service on a particular protocol. And so Guidepad supports a couple different protocols, the usual ones, right? HTTP, HTTPS, TCP, UDP. You can make surface exposures for all that stuff and then point them at your services, and then the environment that that thing is living in is managed by Guidepad and will expose it in the way that you want it to. If you think about like the Kubernetes service concept, that's what this is, except one level up, right? So it's not
does
just
service exposure map to the executor, or does it map to something else first? It seems a bit weird that it goes straight to an executor, right?
Well, so the way that it does go straight to an executor, because in the service exposure, what we have is a reference to the exposed service within the record, right? And so that just points right to it. And then it's the job of the environment's public interface, which is another entity, to take the service exposure and then manipulate the environment in the way that it needs to make sure traffic can be routed properly. But that's not what we're going to use it for here. What we're going to do is link the operation to the service exposure, right? So Guidepad has the ability to say this operation is actually handled by the service pointed to by the service exposure. So when you call execute, you don't because a default operation in Guidepad has an execute method attached to it, and that runs normally, takes the input, calls the handler, produces the output, and returns it to the caller. When you link an operation to a service exposure, it tries to see if Guidepad knows the protocol of the service exposure, and then we'll handle the operation over that protocol rather than call the internal execute method. And so that's what we're going to do here, right? So that it, so when this thing is called, it's going to be like, oh, hey, I'm like actually linked to the service exposure, which is linked to this Node.js executor. I'm going to send my request over there, run, and then return the result. And what it also does is it sort of shunts this into here so that it can run, right? Like at runtime, it transfer. Right. So say calls, and then calls, and then I guess this thing uses that. So anyway, so this is what we're going to do, right? In order to get it to work. Does that make sense, or any questions or things I should clarify?
Potentially.
Okay.
No, I think I'm definitely following along, right? I'm going to try and repeat it back, and you can tell me anything that I get wrong.
Sure.
And we'll see where we are. So let's start with the easy part here. The service exposure is some sort of domain name, port mapping, ingress to our environment. It's just a thing, right? It could be rawcode.ishere.com, and then it comes into the service exposure. That service exposure has a direct link or relationship with a Node.js operation, and that is all bundled together for the executor to know what to execute, I'm assuming, where the implementation is coming from artifact storage, which could be, let's just say, S3 compatible API or something like that. And then the executor takes all of that information, the service exposure, the operation, and the artifact, executes the thing, and then returns a response. That's kind of my understanding at the moment. I don't know if I got any of that wrong.
Yeah, you got most of it. The only thing is that it's the actual operation that handles all of that negotiation stuff. And the executor is just dumb, right? It literally just takes a command. So it's a pretty stupid service. And I'll show you its implementation. But yeah, so that's the idea, right? I think you got it.
Well, let me ask you a couple more questions then,
course.
because obviously right now people are watching. They're getting a pretty deep insight into how Guidepad works. Now, we're doing this for Node.js. You mentioned that Python exists, but one of the things that we've discussed before is that Guidepad can make this work for any language. I mean, it could be Go, it could be Elixir. I'm assuming it could even be a Bash shell script. It's not really that opinionated. If you can write an executor, then Guidepad can do it, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, I mean...
And it's very small. I'll show you the executor.
Yeah, let's go look. Let's go for it.
There it is.
We only see Miro.
Oh, no. Here you go. I did it for suspense. Here it is.
All right. So there's an attribute called service type. Does a deep copy. Where's it execute?
Yeah, that's a good question. So remember we have this operation, right?
Yes.
Like this is the thing that actually does the operating. The service is just so you can have something deployed that can handle the operation request, right? So that's why it's so small, is it's just like, I need to have a service that I can basically attach an image to, so that when I deploy it, the right image gets deployed. And that's what the service is doing. The operation, I'll show you the operation. And that is not in the plug. Oh, sorry. I showed you a plugin and I didn't mention plugins. So let me do a quick aside on the plugin and tell you what that is. So you can see this is a repository, right? It's called Guidepad demo. So Guidepad has the notion of plugins, and plugins allow you to layer functionality on top of the core system. And what we typically do with plugins is that we'll have one per sort of like industry vertical that we run into. So for example, we have a services division at the company, and we're doing something for an emergency transport company. They want us to make a ride sharing thing. And so what we did is we wrote a plugin for ride sharing on top of Guidepad. And then we wrote another plugin on top of that is just for this particular customer, right? So we've specialized Guidepad in their instance for transport related concepts. And then we made more customizations just for that particular customer. And then if we had other customers in that vertical, we would customize again. But what I'm doing here with this demo, and every plugin is a repository, right? It's written in Python at the moment, but we have plans for SDKs for all the sort of popular stuff. It's in the roadmap. We'll see when we get there. But anyway, so this is sort of the structure of a plugin, right? You have like the top level sub package. You have a little entry point here called plugin.py. This is sort of where everything gets exported from your plugin, and then you define like custom operations, custom services, like this demo.js executor. You can do custom types, which we actually haven't talked about too much, but we will. I promise. We'll get to everything. And then work plans, if you want to have custom work plans. And then at runtime, what Guidepad does is it reads the plugins that are configured in your instance, sort of reconciles if there are changes in the remote that you don't have locally. If there are changes, it pulls them, installs all the requirements, and then adds everything in the plugin to your runtime environment, so you have access to all this stuff. And so what we're doing with the demo.js executor is we're extending a service that comes from vanilla Guidepad right here at the language executor, which is that's the thing that you were talking about just a moment ago, David, about if we want to do this for another language, right? Like what would you need to do? Well, you would extend this executor, and then you would also go into I don't have this in the plugin yet. It's just in normal Guidepad, but you would go and also extend the operation. Sorry. Here. So this is the language exec operation, right? And we want a Node.js one of this basically, right? So
Yeah.
luckily I've already written it. You can see it's also very small.
Okay, so now it's starting to click for me. When you showed me the class at first, I didn't realize the state machine was above it, where it's kind of defining that it's going to run inside a container. Now we can see the command is node followed by the file name.
Whatever, yeah.
So now it's starting to come together about how this actually works. Can we take a look at that state plan in the plugin?
Oh yeah, sure.
The state machine, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. It doesn't work yet. So this was going to be part of maybe the advanced session after this one, is
Right.
getting this to work, because I think
This isn't the advanced one because my brain is already fried. Come on.
Oh no! I need to slow down. This is supposed to be like Guidepad, maybe 102. I didn't realize I was giving like 602. So I can maybe tone it down a couple notches. But anyway, yeah. So this is the state machine that I want to use to eventually manage the executor, right? Because like if you think about Lambda, when you run a Lambda function, you don't have to tell Lambda like, hey, I'm about to run my function. I also have to go manually like deploy, the runtime where that function is going to execute. So we would want the same thing in our Guidepad replacement, right? And how would you do that in Guidepad? Well, you would do it with a state machine. And what that state machine would do, I've sort of started to put it in here, but I haven't fully fleshed it out yet. You would use Guidepad's requirements system to say, if there is an operation that's trying to run, but it can't, so it's in the pending state, I need to take this service and rebuild it and then redeploy it. Yep. Right? And so that's what I'm hoping to encode here in the state machine for each of these. So I have the transitions built up, right? So I have a transition from not deployed to built, right? So this thing doesn't exist anywhere yet, but you need to go build it. And then the next thing is, I want to be able to go from deployed to not deployed. So after maybe some cooldown period, no one's used the operation in a while, I'm going to undeploy the service to free up resources in my cluster. And then this one here is, I'm going to take this from deployed to built. So this is, the thing's already out there. Someone has updated the configuration for my executor to require additional packages. So, I've updated my handler. I now use XYZ package in my little node script or whatever. The thing's already out there. I'm going to rebuild it to include that package, and then I'm going to redeploy it right after. And then this one just goes from built to deployed. So this is like build's finished. I'm going to go deploy it. Yeah, but they're not wired up to all the requirements yet, so I can't actually use it. But at least it sort of lays out conceptually like, this is, and if the UI was working, you'd be able to see these states like logically sort of like mapped out, right? Like these are all the valid states for this type of service. This is how it moves between them. All that's missing are the conditions for the transitions.
All right.
Okay. More questions? Here's the state plan.
I'm fully up to speed now. So okay, here's the state plan, right? So this is the actual commands that happen as we move from phase to phase, right?
Yeah. So this is it uses all the default ones. So that's what's happening down here. I'm just pulling in the defaults from vanilla Guidepad. I'm customizing the build state plan here, and I'm adding build commands. And you could put them in line, like you could just put them in the same module, right? But in order to do that, you have to kind of do something like this. And then I don't really like doing that. So what I tend to do is put them in a file sort of next to the service.
That way syntax highlighting and validation.
Yeah, exactly. So we can look at that. So this. Of course, I've broken the syntax highlighting. I did that after I wrote it the first time. But I'm using templating, right, to only do this when certain things are defined. So this uses like Guidepads. It's using Ginger 2 under the hood, which sort of everybody does if you're doing string interpolation, right? maybe we'll write our own one day if we ever make it big. But anyway, so we just have custom block opens, right? So that if you're writing something in Ansible or something else that uses Jinja, there's no conflicts there. Because if you use the standard ones, it'll just replace all your stuff or make you write, curly bracket percent raw, and then that's also very annoying. So didn't want to have to do that. But anyway, what this is doing is if there are any system package requirements defined on your service or anywhere in the context that the service is in when it enters that state, it will install them here. It just uses APK because we're using the Node Alpine image as the starting point. And then down here, it installs them, basically, if you have NPM requirements.
Yep.
Yeah. So, that's what that does. Yeah, system package. So yes, so APK for system packages, and then NPM for any Node modules that you need. And we can add some of these and rebuild when we feel like it. But let's not do that just yet. Sorry, I was just peeking at the time. Okay, so more questions, or are we good to start doing things in the terminal?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. So, sorry, got to stretch. I always debate whether I want to do this stuff in a notebook. I like working in notebooks a lot. Jupyter notebooks, just because sort of repeatable. I can just kill the kernel and rerun everything. If I'm in IPython and I'm making a bunch of changes, it's a little harder to do it. So I'll probably just do it in here today. So okay, let's go back to our diagram real quick and just think through what we need. So we need the Node.js operation. We need this implementation artifact attached to it. We need the Node.js language executor, and we need the service exposure. So I've shown you the class for the Node.js language executor, but I haven't shown you the instance of it yet. And I actually made that already. I know that's kind of cheating, but I did. So I apologize for that. But here, let's take a peek at your let's go under the hood, because I showed you all the deployed stuff in the user interface. But let's actually use kube control to look at the stuff in your instance. So you probably don't remember this, but in the user interface, we'll just go over there and I'll show you. Sorry. So if you go back to the environment, and we go to the settings. So this, just so your audience knows, this form is auto-generated. So what it does is it reads the type definition for whatever type of thing you're looking at, and then generates the wizard basically off that type definition. We haven't talked about types at all, but types are our language agnostic database representation for schemas. And so everything that we've looked at so far is a type at the end of the day, and that's how it's stored in a database. So we have a type for environment, right? And we have a type for Kubernetes environment, which is what this actual type of environment is. So if we go through, there's sort of the vanilla stuff, but then you get to here, right? And you can see oh, there's a raw code namespace. And that means that everything, and this is only on Kubernetes environment types, right? Other environments don't care about a namespace, so why would they have that? And so this namespace is actually in the cluster, right? So if I do K8, blah, is this too small? Should I increase this, or is this looking good?
No, I think we're okay.
Okay, great. Let's get all the pods. Here they are. You can see this is from my setup last night. You can see how old this project is. It's about a day old. That's when the stuff was put in here. Anyway, so these are all the things that have been deployed, right? Guidepad is managing all of these pods, essentially, as part of the deployments. And we actually already have a little Node.js executor in here.
Yep.
We'll come back to that. But I just wanted to sort of show you, here's some stuff. It exists. And now we'll go back into that notebook I was looking at, and I'll show you the data record for that service. And this is sort of the standard way that like we interface with Guidepad, like in an interactive session. You typically don't have to do this. I'm just doing this because I might make changes to my local code I don't want to have to push it up every time, basically. So I'm sort of cheating and just setting my Python path. If I remove this, when this happens, Guidepad will pull down that repository for the demo plugin and put it on my Python path for me. So I don't have to do that. I just want to. So I'll do that. It's going to initialize Guidepad, and we'll use it for the rest of the session here. It's starting a kernel, so it's taking an extra second. Okay, cool. So I guess we can walk through what just happened, because this is probably your audience's first time seeing it. So we load the connection details from the local environment. Guidepad can be configured either with a direct connection to the primary data store that I'm using, and that's like super admin access. Or you can use it in API proxy mode, where you just have, and this is what we do for like end users at our customers. Like you just give them their username and password, and you can actually use Guidepad through our API. So it translates all of the data store requests into API requests, and then uses the RBAC like for that user to sort of sandbox all their permissions and stuff. But since I'm me, I don't have to do that, and I can just connect directly. So that's what I did. So let's take a look at that Node.js executor thing that we had just talked about. So I'm going to import the type registry. Types.registry, import the type registry. So the type registry is an object inside Guidepad that knows everything about all the types in your instance. And the nice thing about the type registry is you can ask for any type you want from it. So you can just give it the type name or the class name. I'll just do the type name to show that you can do that. And then if I were to look at the variables that are set up, you can see here that this service that I just assigned is a fully fledged class that was generated by Guidepad from the definition of what it means to be a service.
Like a service container from OOP.
Yes. Yep. Yep. So here we go. Get all the attributes that are defined on a service, all that good stuff. But the other thing you can do with a type, once you have it, right, is you can do CRUD operations on it. So I want to find the Node.js service that I made earlier so that we can play with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say Node.js is service.list single. And I don't remember what the name of that thing is. Actually, let me just get all of them, and then I'll just find it in the list, because I turned 40 this year, so short-term memory is no longer one of my strong suits.
Yeah, I hear that.
So I'm just going to grab them all, and then we can take a peek and figure out which one I actually want. Well, why don't you refresh? Oh, you know what? It's because I'm in the wrong one. No, I'm not. Oh, there it is. Yep, great. I guess it just took a second. So let's see here. You. Perfect. It's not coming back as the right service, though, so that's a little troubling, right? Like it should be coming back as the as like the class, right? So you can see the classes here, like next to it, right? And it should be coming back as a Node.js like executor service, but it's coming back as like a bare service. So I need to figure out like why that is happening. And it might be, I'll just verify that. So let's say Node.js is services -1, and then Node.js, wasn't fast enough. Yeah, it's coming back as a service. That's strange. Well, it doesn't actually hurt us too much, as long as when we like do the deployments and stuff, it's like coming back as the right type. But it's strange. You know what usually happens when this occurs is that Guidepad like doesn't know like what that type of thing is yet, and so it just returns like the default type, right? So you can see here, it was able to find the specific types for these, and so it returned them. But this is just a bare service, and this one in particular that we're looking at now, like it can't find the the subtype for it. So it just returns like the normal type so that it doesn't, completely throw up. That's okay. We can still work with this. So going back to our diagram, like we have this service, right? We have the service. We need the operation, and we need the implementation, and we need a service exposure to point to it. So let's work on those. Let's work on those pieces. So let's pull in an operation. So we said we want to do a Node.js operation. So we'll just import that real quick from Guidepad operations built-in language exec Node.js operation. I could do this, or I could do. Let me make sure I capitalize it correctly. As long as it's in Guidepad's sort of like global context, it should come back as the right thing. Yep, we got it. There. Oh no, it's a string.
String, yeah.
Yeah, boo. Okay, here, let's fix it. So I think what happened is it's just not in like the system like scope. So what Guidepad does is when it does the initialize, it pulls all the types that have been persisted to the data store, and then also it sort of merges that information with what is defined like within the code. So what that means that it came back as a string is it's either not been persisted into Guidepad's like centralized data storage, or it's not imported in the system level packages that Guidepad maintains to like make sure everything's in scope, like when it starts up. So let's just make sure it's in scope, and then I'll refresh this, and that should return what I want it to return. So we just have this thing, system types. It's where everybody lives. Very large. So I'm guessing, yep, just missing it here.
And would this be why we got a generic service type for the Node.js executor?
Probably. And that one is a little, like that shouldn't be imported here because it's defined in a plugin, right? So the plugin should be loading it for us. But the fact that it's not, actually, thank you. Just talking through it, I now know why it's not doing that. Because it didn't do this. So I said there's a plugin entry point, right? That like sort of exports everything that the plugin defines, but I did not do that for my new shiny toy. So that's why it's not there. And you can see I was doing a dog walker demo before this, so that's why that stuff's in there. Let's see. It's demo node. Yes, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to save that. We're going to save this over here once I get built-in language exec node. Perfect. Okay. So having done that, now I think I can just like restart the kernel and rerun all this good stuff, and then it should come back the right way. Yep.
Oh, yeah,
So everything's happy, right? Like you can find all the stuff now, and everything's the right everything's the right type of thing. So what I want to do is I want to make an instance of this operation, right? And the Node.js operation, if you want to know like what attributes it takes, you can always find that defined on the type itself. Just do keys. And these are all the attributes. If you do items instead, it comes back names and attribute types. And you can introspect all the attribute types to like find out what they are if you want to. So what we're going to do is we're going to make an instance of this operation, right? And I believe all we need to do is say my Node.js op is this, and the name is going to be demo Node.js operation. And I'm just going to verify that like there aren't any. Of course it does that. Yeah, I mean, it's very straightforward. There's like nothing crazy I need to set in here. Same thing at this level. It's just this, but that's actually set. Okay, great. So we'll go back to here, and then that, and then the only other keyword is exec support provided by like Citibank or I don't know, Publix. No, it's provided by the Node.js executor that we got up there. So all this is doing is telling to this operation that, hey, when you try to execute, if you don't see that there is one of these types of things, because remember, this is a type. I should have named it better. Oh, no, sorry, that's the service. It's not the type. Let's get the type instead. And we call that demo.js executor. That's right. You gonna update for me? Yeah, okay, that's good. Perfect. So then we can put that in here and then do that. And so now we have this operation. We can inspect it down here below. It's active. It doesn't run in async mode. That's okay. I'll talk about async mode later if you want to. It's got a bunch of options for things that happen in the API, like batch, or you can disable authorization if this is just like a bare thing that anybody can hit. By default, Guidepad puts all the operations behind our back on all of the APIs that it uses. And so there's a whole way to link operations to roles and then roles to users, and then that's how you can control access to them. Sorry, I'm just going through here, making sure we have everything we need. Provided by is the thing that we want to set, right? So this is a link. If you look at it's a reference collection, and the reference to it. If I go and show you the actual type for this, if I go Node.js executor, and then we want to look at provided by, you can see. Oops. Sorry. Oh, you know what? That's an operation. Node.js operation. There we go. Thanks. It's a reference. What is it a reference to? Oh my God. Reference object. Shush. Why you like this? Nope. It's a one-to-one. My bad. I'm just going to go to the definition because it should be there. It should be there. Okay. Yeah. Reference type. I don't know why it's being so.
You did reference. You're referenced.
Oh, did I typo? Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Okay. So you can see before, in the diagram, right? We want to link this operation to a surface exposure. Well, how are we going to do that? We're going to do that through the provided by attribute because it's a reference to a surface exposure. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to import the surface exposure type. So surface exposure. And then, so we have this thing and we want to make a surface exposure. So what are we going to do? We're going to say S is a surface exposure. And if I show you the surface exposure class, again, it's defined. That's the interesting. One of the interesting things about Guidepad is you can define types in code. You can define them strictly in data, or you can do a hybrid thing where some of it is in code and then you add stuff on from data storage. But for all the core Guidepad types, we just implement them as code, in the library, right? So this is a surface exposure here. The things that we're interested in on this are the expose service, which we're going to link to the executor that we created. We're going to not care about the public interface ID or the suffix or the ports, but we are going to care about the protocol, right? Because that's the thing that knows how to communicate with the Node.js executor that we have on hand. We want to make sure it's active, and the other stuff doesn't matter a whole bunch. Great. So we're going to make one. We're going to call this the demo Node.js executor exposure, and the protocol is going to be cube exec without a minus. So this is not a standard protocol, right? obviously. This is a protocol that we came up with so that our operations can talk to a pod, basically, running in Kubernetes. But what that means, though, is that any service that you want to use this particular protocol that we implemented, you can, as long as you have Guidepad. So we're going to do that. We're going to say the exposed service is our Node.js service. Let me just make sure I haven't overwritten that with anything. Nope, still the right service. Great. Going to do that. And so right now these objects just exist in memory, right? Like they're not persisted anywhere. Guidepad like has no like notion of them. They're just locally on my machine. So what we need to do is we need to save them so that they get persisted to Guidepad's data storage and that we can use them in like downstream stuff. So we're going to do Node.js save and s save. And there's a lot that goes on when I do this, so I don't want to. I don't want to.
Well?
What's that?
Do you not need to save the operation as well?
We will in a moment.
Right.
I haven't linked those things together yet, so that's why I'm not saving them. I'm just saving these two for now. So it's going to take a minute because the Node.js. Well, I should say that we're connected to a very small MongoDB instance. Very small, meaning an eighth of a CPU. So the fact that it works for me at all is wonderful. Anyway, so those are saved now. So if I wanted to like fetch them, right, I could just do, my Node.js. Oh, you know what? No, I don't know why I saved Node.js. Oh, you know why I saved Node.js? Yeah, because now it's exposed. I didn't need to do that. I've already fetched this, but now I could fetch the exposure if I wanted to. So it's S is service exposure. So I just want to make sure that like it's saved properly, So service exposure list. Let's just fetch it by name. Oh, sorry, list single. List without the single on it is for many things. It returns a generator. I just want a single one. So you can see it down here. This is the exposure we just created. You can see its name, its protocol is kubeexec. It's attached to the right service. We can see that if we go through here and here, and the name is that executor that we have. So now we have completed this step and linked it to this. Now we need to make our operation complete, and then we should be almost ready to actually like run the operation.
All right.
So, and obviously I'm taking a little bit longer than normal because I want to make sure this all makes sense.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. So we have the Node.js operation. We want to link it to the service exposure so that it can handle the requests on our behalf. So we just do Node.js op provided by is s. Yes. Okay. And then if I go to the Node.js op, we can now see that the provided by is linked to that service exposure, so I can go ahead and save it. Okay, cool.
So does that service exposure have an endpoint we can curl? Like, how do we interact with that service exposure now?
So you won't actually need to, right? Because the thing you want to interface with is your operation. So this will have an endpoint. This will not.
Okay.
Because I haven't like actually attached this to a public interface anywhere. So it's sort of just like an internal exposure that Guidepad can use.
Oh, right. Okay, so the service exposure is for the executor, and then the operation is what's... All right, okay.
This is what everybody wants to use, right? You want this portable thing that can run, some node code. Yep. Okay, so we got all those bits and pieces. Let's pretend that I hadn't deployed the executor. Right, so let's build it and then like deploy it, just so we can see the magic happen. So what we want to do is I'm going to use the CLI for this, and I know David, we talked about like me working on the cool text UI. That's still something I'm working on, but haven't gotten there yet. So
I
we're
was
going
going to ask about that, but
No, it's not ready. It's not ready for prime time. Maybe I can preview it, but yeah, we still have to deal with the multiple connects every time we run a command, unfortunately. At least in this, I mean, that's sort of why I work over here, right? So that you only have to do like one initialize and you can go nuts. Service enter state. So we're going to use Guidepad CLI to have the service enter a particular state. What state do we want to have it enter? We want to have it enter the built state because we need to build the image that the executor is going to use when it runs. So I'm just going to pull the, I'm going to pull the name from here again, so I don't have to like type it. Great. Why'd you put quotes around it? Okay, so you need the name of the service, you need the name of the environment, that's just raw code. And then you need the name of the state that you want it to go into. So if I hit enter, it's going to connect to Guidepad. It's going to look up all the state plans that this service has. It's going to look at the environment and be like, which state plans do you have that are compatible with the environment that you selected? Well, there's this one. It is the build Node.js Docker image, and it will put it in the built state. Do I want to proceed? Absolutely. So I'm going to hit yes, and then it's going to wait a tick. So you can see it's actually like running the state plan here. Cool.
Nice.
That did not look right, though.
Uh-oh.
That was way too fast. That was way too fast to build an image. So I'm guessing something happened, and I have a good idea of what went wrong. Is that somehow the state plan for deploy has the build state attached to it. So this was actually the deploy plan. Because you can see, yeah, it just like did something super, super fast. So let's take a look. We can peek under the hood and see what happened. Because there would be something new in here. I need to delete those. Why haven't I deleted those yet? Yeah, see, like nothing happened, right? So something really funky went on here.
So does that mean we have to look at the state plan?
It does, yeah. It means we need to debug what's actually happening here. So you can see it's using this stage.
Yep.
Right? Oh, user error. It's not that environment. That environment is a Kubernetes cluster. So of course, it's going to try to like run these Ansible commands against Kubernetes. I want the build environment, not the production environment, right? I need to build this image in Packer. So I need to use a different environment name. We'll go back over here. It's this one.
Packer build.
Yes. Guidepad default build. So we're going to do that instead. Oops. It's going to do the connection stuff. It's going to ask me again. I'm going to hit yes. Okay, great. We're not seeing Ansible, which is a great sign because that means it's doing something funkier, which I'm both proud of and not proud of what it's doing right now. Here, what it's doing is this. It's going to be making a pod over here in a second. I hope so. I sure hope so. Let's check out the manager and see what it's doing.
Would it be in a different namespace?
It shouldn't. It should know better than that. That's not how I brought it up. Oh yeah, see, it's going now. So it should be appearing momentarily. Yes, perfect. Okay, so it's here.
Seconds ago. Cool.
Okay, so what happened there is Guidepad ran a state plan. It said, hey, I want to run this state plan against the Guidepad build environment. The Guidepad build environment has each environment has what we call a control plane, and that's the thing that takes the state plan instructions and executes it against that environment type. For the Packer build environment, there is a Packer control plane, and what that does is it actually uses Guidepad's work plan management system to schedule a pod that knows how to build the thing using the instructions in the state plan. So that's what's happening here, right? We're using our internal automation tool to automatically run and manage a build of an image using Docker and Docker. They have to use the Docker and Docker image to do that, which is its own can of worms. But we take care of that can of worms for you, so you don't have to do that. And then if we look at the logs, you can probably see what Packer's been up to. Unless I have debugging turned off, I might. Yep, all done. So this built a new image, and if I go over to the other thing, you can see that it said it was successful, right? So now we've built an image for this service, and if I want to look at that image, remember we have the notion of artifacts, right? So artifacts are things that are file-like. Well, we consider Docker images to be file-like objects, so we put them in our artifact storage. So if we were to take the artifact type, and get all my artifacts, you know what? I'll just do a filter on it. Okay, artifacts, Docker images. Nope, typo.
Right in the middle.
Yep, list. It's a generator. I have to make it real. Perfect. So you see there's 3 in there, right? There is the default image for Guidepad's API. There is the default image for the user interface. And then there is this one. And this one is the artifact that was built for the demo.js executor. Right?
All right.
And you can see it was last uploaded just now. It's in this storage backend, which is the, it doesn't have a storage backend, because I'll spare you the gory details. But you can see this is where it lives, right? It's in our ECR.
Yep.
So having built the image, right, we can deploy it. So now I do want to use that other environment. I want to go into the deployed state. So this is what we saw earlier, and that was why it was so sort of concerning for me, because now it's deploying the thing. So if we go back into the cluster, you can see the old one's terminating down there, and we'll just let it come back up, and then I'll just show you that it's using the right image, just as a sanity check, right? And then we can also see that it's Node, because that was the idea, right? That we built a Node image, right? On the fly. So I should be able to get in there and run the Node binary. So we'll do that too. Are you serious? Yeah. I'm so... Oh my God. I swear I'm competent. I promise.
Sorry, you've had to do a lot of typing in front of a camera, which is never an easy task. So.
Well, that's very generous of you to say. I appreciate that. Okay, so let's just make sure it's not doing anything, because I'm pretty sure it just sleeps when it starts up. So yeah, nothing going on. Great. Let's describe it. You can see here. Oh, we'll just look down here at the bottom. Yep. So here's that image we made.
Yep.
Great. And if I get into it, does it have Node? No.
Nope.
Wonderful. Maybe it's because maybe Node. Nope. Okay. Well, which image was it made off of? That would be good to know. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to run the operation that built this thing locally so that we can watch it happen. And then it's going to tell us which image it used as the source. So maybe what's happening is that it's using a different image that I'm trying to tell it to use. Actually, I know that's what's happening because right before this call, I fixed a bug and I did not push the bug fix to
You
your
get
branch.
pushing fixes. You should
Yeah, I know. I know. Well, the thing is, I haven't set up a CI/CD pipeline for you yet because your thing's only a day old, and I don't know. I quote unquote grew up before a lot of the modern like CI/CD stuff. So when I'm doing things myself, I like to have a manual touch sometimes. But this is my fault. I will own this this problem, and we'll fix it. So what happened is the thing built the wrong image, right? And it's because in the version of the code that your instance is using, it doesn't respect the requirements that I'm putting on the stage entity. So you can say like, hey, stage, when you are run, I want you to use this requirement. And so what I did is I used that harness to attach an image requirement to the build process so that it uses the node image. But the code that you have in your instance isn't respecting that, right? So I'll just run it locally, and then we should be good to go. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm actually going to take the operation. So if you remember, this thing that ran, oh, this isn't the one, it's gone. But it was running an operation asynchronously, right? So it was running a particular like build operation. I can take the build operation instructions from this pod and then just run them locally using Guidepad. It'll run the same operation locally using the code that I have. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to pull this over here so that you don't see some stuff that you're not supposed to see as far as credentials and things, because I can't guarantee this pod doesn't have them in it. Give me just a moment.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, great. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna have to maybe scrub some stuff out of this later. If you want to make a note of the timestamp, I think I was. Okay, thanks. So I thought I'd be able to make it the whole call without doing it, and I almost got there. Almost got there. Anyway, so this is the operation that the work plan was running, right? So I can run it locally myself just by like grabbing the stuff. And so I'm going to do that now, and I'll put it in log level debug so we can see it do the right thing. So you can see it's actually like using Packer, right, to build the image. And here it's using Node, which is what we want it to do. Up at the top here. And that's going to do the push and all that good stuff.
All right.
And we're good. So now we're going to redeploy the service. And it should use the right image, and I should be able to run Node on it. Cool. Okay, so let's try that again. Git pods. Let's wait for that to come back up.
Just add a get a -w to your command.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
And we'll just wait for it to.
You can see how much I'm usually like in another thing and not in here. Appreciate that.
Terminate, and there we go.
Awesome. Okay, right image.
Moment of truth. Hooray.
Excellent. Okay, great. So we have the executor out there. It exists. Control D. Thank you. Okay, so it exists. We can now, because we have the, let's go back to our diagram, right? We've got the operation, we've got the surface exposure, we've got the Node.js executor deployed using a node image. We don't have this. So let's make that. And then we can probably try to run the operation and then debug its inevitable failure for the rest of the call. So where do we want to do that? We go back over here. So we have the class. I'm pretty sure. Yep, we have the Node.js operation type, and we have the op itself. So one thing that operations have is sort of a helper, right? If I go to the operation class, is they all have this method on them, which is register implementation, and they also have register text implementation. And those two methods take care of all the legwork of creating that artifact that I was referencing in the diagram. So because we have an operation instance, I can just call this method on it and provide it some text and a dummy function name and a dummy file name, and then it's going to go make the artifact, and then we should be able to call the operation. Okay, so we'll do Node.js op. Actually, sorry, command. Yeah, we're just going to do console.log.
Yeah, keep it simple.
And then we're going to say Node.js op register text implementation command. And then the function name is going to be hello. And the file name is going to be hello.js. And I don't think I need to provide a storage backend because it should just use the default one configured in the system. Let's test out that assumption though and hit enter. Hey, there you go. So now we have an artifact that should contain that our little function in it, basically. So now the moment of truth, right? So we have the operation. We could just call it and then see what explodes. So I think we should do that.
Well, some confidence.
Well, I like to set my I'm never disappointed, right? Because I'm always like, it's going to be a disaster. And then if it works, great. If not, I assumed it was going to be a disaster. So yeah. Anyway, here, let's hit go. Nope. Didn't like it. Okay, so let's reconfigure some things and get it to go.
Missing an environment.
I do need to make a public interface.
Right.
That's the part that is missing. So I was wrong in my diagram. You do have to map this to a public interface, and it needs to be the public interface for your environment that you're in, right? So we're going to have a K8s public interface here. And the reason we need to do that is that this operation and the surface exposure need to know, it needs to be able to get at how do I actually run something on this pod back here. And the way that you know how to do that is through your kubeconfig file, right? Because that contains like the service address and your credentials and all that good stuff. And we happen to have one attached to this environment. Because every time you create a Kubernetes environment in Guidepad, it creates a service account, attaches the creds to it, so that service account can only manage the stuff like in the namespace attached to that environment, basically. Excuse me. So this is going to be like this, and what that does here is it like gets credentials and connection details. Oops. Okay. Yeah, and let's drag this down here a little bit so you can like read that. Okay. But it's it's from this environment, so we'll do that. Great. Okay. Actually, this lives in here. This lives there. Beautiful. All right, so the only step we missed was setting up the public interface on the service exposure. It's just another attribute, so we can do that pretty easily. So if I go through here and I pull in, let's go back to where we made the service exposure. You know what? Let me just, I'll just do it down here.
I think it's still bound to S, right?
Yeah, it is. So I'm going to remove this. I'm going to pull in the environment real quick. So environment. And then code. Good. You can see it's a Kubernetes environment, so it should have all the stuff that we need. It should also have the public interface attached to it. So let's just double check that really quick. Here we go. Yep, public interface. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that public interface, we're going to link it to the service exposure so that that function I just ran will work. So we've got S, and we have a public interface ID, and we're going to say raw code public interface first ID. And I'll just double check that it is still down to S. It is. Perfect. And then we'll do s.save.
The nice thing about you doing this as a Jupyter notebook is now you've got everything saved as a wee artifact of how you've done it.
Exactly. And I can show this to people on my team. I can give it to other folks. I can revisit this when someone's like, how did you do that? Yeah. And we try to, as much as possible, like encourage our team to do this. I mean, when we had a machine learning engineer write a bunch of blog posts, and he would just do all his work here, right? And then put the markdown for the blog post like in line with it. It's very, very convenient. So yeah, okay, so we have everything linked up. That particular error shouldn't happen anymore. Let's call the operation again. And let's actually like save the result too. Okay. You want to be like that. I get it. Public interface, service exposure, public interface ID. That's not right. So the surface exposure should have that set. Yep, and it should be doing that there. So let me just make sure. Maybe it didn't get set properly. No, that's set. And if I look for the public interface, gosh darn it, interface. I just want to make sure like I can find it myself. Oh, and of course it's gone now. One thing I don't like about it is that the copy key bindings like don't work for stuff like in here. So you have to select and then like copy and then paste. Kind of annoying. Okay, so it can find it when it does it here, and it's set properly on S. Maybe it didn't take. So let's pull it back out. Let's inspect it. Nope, it's there. So we need to do like some more digging, right? We need to like figure out where somewhere in this call chain, it's like not getting the public interface ID. Okay, so let's go into the traceback. It's here in kubeexec. So this is the custom protocol implementation for the kubeexec protocol that we did. That's the whole backbone of this particular like running stuff against something deployed in Kubernetes. So if I go to kubeexec, the protocol, we can see it's on line 93, which is right here. No, not there. I see. It's calling handle kubeexec exposure, and then it's actually in handle kube. Okay, got it. Yeah, okay. Public interface first. Oh, okay. Well, it's saying it can't find that. Handle kubeexec exposure. Usages. Okay, and so that happens in the operation. Yep. Do. Sorry, I'm not sure if this is interesting or not. I'm just so this is sort of how you're getting to see how the magic happens, right? So when I call this operation, right, like when I do this, I'm basically doing the call like I'm executing underscore call on an operation like instance, right? It's an instance of the operation class, and so inside the operation, there's an execute method here. And you can see this is another interesting tidbit. It usually emits an event every time it runs. And so this helps us be a little bit event driven. This is how we can like wire things up to like when stuff happens. Because you can set a requirement on things like your work plans and your state plans that are conditional on a particular event happening. So those events could include like an arbitrary operation firing, right? Or returning with a success or with a failure, or those things. And we might see that if we have another session where we go into some other details. But anyway, when you try to do execute though, up in here, it will do a couple things to figure out like, oh, hey, like, are you asynchronous? Yes, no. Oh, I'm not asynchronous. I'm just going to do execute. And then inside execute, what's going to happen is it tries to find the implementation. And the implementation could be one of three things, right? It could be either a surface exposure, which is what we're doing, right? Or it could be handled in some remote artifact. We need to download it and then compile the artifact and then run it in the artifact or run it from the artifact, or you're just running a local handler, which is what happens down here. So we're up in the first case, right? Which is we're trying to execute this operation through a surface exposure. So we build a partial function and return that. And then we attach the target surface exposure as the first thing. So the issue is you can see it's trying to use provided by first. And what we've done is we've saved the public interface on the surface exposure, but we haven't refreshed the database definition of the operation.
Right.
So the operation is stale, and so its surface exposure pointer doesn't have the public interface ID that we just set. So one way to solve this within Guidepad would be to have something like an instance map, where at the process level, we have a map of all the objects that are sort of in scope. And then operations on one of them would change it for everything that has a reference to it. I haven't implemented that yet, but it's on my sort of like internal roadmap to do that one day. Anyway, so what that means we have to do is just like, we just have to we can either reload the operation, which will fetch the proper service exposure details from the database, or I could just like reassign it. We'll do the former and just fetch it again from the database. So, or fetch it for the first time, because we've never fetched it after creating it. So let's do that. So we'll do that here. You know what, let me insert. I know there's an insert above. I think it's a right-click operation. Yep. No. Fair enough. Can I drag you? You can also see like I don't do this too much either. So let's cut you, paste you, and then we're going to take this guy and we're going to fetch it again. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So take that, put on here. And then we're going to do a list single instead of this creation. I know I didn't need to do that, but whatever. Good. Okay, great. And so let's take a peek at that service exposure thing just to make sure that it's all wired up properly. It should be. Provided by
First.
Yep. And then there we go.
Woohoo!
Should be good now. Okay, let's do it again. And see where we get. It's doing stuff that's happening. Okay, it returned. And
Which
what does it have
result?
inside it?
Oh, hey.
Hey, it worked. Great. So, yeah. Okay, so now you could put arbitrary JavaScript inside that operation, right? And it would run inside the executor just by like re-registering the implementation. You could also, so like, you know, here, right? Like you could register a different handler, right? And then rerun it. So like, let's do it. You know, let's do hi instead of hello. It's not optimized, so it's not the fastest thing in the world, but
Very nice.
yes. So yeah, should I go over sort of like what's happening there, or like what are you interested in taking away from that?
I mean, I think I need a nap after that.
Okay.
Lucky,
I mean, I have to go back to work, but I would love a nap too.
No, I think the way that you've walked through that really helps solidify all the ideas. You know, I think if people are watching this, right, and you've stayed for nearly 2 hours to understand how this works, what they're going to take away is everything is a type. And I love the way the Jupyter Notebook reveals that as well. You've been pulling things out of the registry. You've been using the methods for list single, even creating some resources. All of this is just stored as like JSON, right? And your backing store and registered.
Yeah, you want to see it? This is you. This is your instance. It's MongoDB. But if we take a peek at this, and I know you said you needed an app, so I apologize for like dragging this on. But if I do this, so from Guidepad, import data store, right, and do data store, session data stores by name. It's not just the one, right? There's 3 in play here. There's one that stores your secrets encrypted at rest. There's one that stores all that data. This is what we were just looking at, right? And then there's this one, which we haven't looked at, but it stores only 2 types in there right now, log and event. Those 2 types go in there. But that's all transparent, right? So like if I were to import the log type and then do log.list, it would go out to that data store. But you wouldn't know that, right? Unless you cared about it, in which case you would know about it. But yeah, so this is all of it's stored in here, right? all of those things that we were fetching. Same thing that showed on the user interface, same thing that we interfaced with on the command line.
Yeah, I just think this is super cool the way it's all. The key word is what you said earlier, right? It's composition. All these types come together to provide a very, well, I don't want to say a cohesive system, right? But whatever system you're trying to build, you can architect those types to do the things that you want. And there's so many things we could dive into. I mean, even the event-driven stuff with the annotation on the function was really cool. But I think what we need to do is schedule a follow-up.
Sure.
Where we can dive into some of these concepts in more detail, build something else, and just keep showing people the power of the Guidepad framework, because there's a lot to digest here. So I'm going to say let's leave it there for now.
Okay.
Let's follow up scheduled, and hopefully, if you've watched this, please leave comments in the comment section. Let us know what you want us to build, what you want us to dive deeper into, and we'll make sure that we have a follow-up where we go into this in much more detail. I'm going to pop over just to our big face mode now so we can kind of wrap this up. Just because I also want to get home to do my daughter's bedtime. So that,
oh yeah, makes sense.
But that was fantastic. Thank you so much, Matthew.
Thanks for having me, and thanks
I've said
for.
this so many times, but
what's that?
I've said this so many times to you, to Reggie, and on previous videos, right? The things, it really is limitless, the things you can do with Guidepad. Your own imagination is the only limitation. And I hope what people take away from that is just understanding those atomic types, the primitives,
right.
how to compose them together. You really can build anything in this. So, go to guidepad.io, check out the website, and get in touch with the team and make some awesome things together.
Well, yeah, thanks for having us. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for putting up with my my mind. I mean, because Guidepad is like, it's my brain. So thanks for living inside it for 2 hours. I appreciate that.
Definitely my pleasure. It was a whole lot of fun. Any last words before we say goodbye to people?
Oh, I think I've said enough. But looking forward to the next thing we get to do. I had fun. So again,
me too.
Thanks for having me. Yep.
All right. To everyone watching, thank you for joining us. Remember to get your comments into the comment section. Matthew and I will definitely be following up again soon. And Matthew, thank you again for walking us through that. I'll speak to you shortly. To everyone else, have a great evening.
Take care.
Thank you for watching Warcode Live.